Hello and welcome. America marks Martin Luther King Day on the eve of the inauguration of the first black U.S. president. Had he not been assassinated in April 1968, the celebrated African-American civil rights leader would have been turning 80. Well, president-elect for just one more day, Barack Obama becomes the 44th leader of the United States, arguably the most powerful position on earth. On Monday, the dream. On Tuesday, the reality.
I have a dream. One day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Well, those famous words electrified the almost 250,000 people gathered at the protest. 4 decades later, a junior senator from Illinois also held the crowd in rapture at the Democratic National Convention of 2004. And 4 years after that, when he decided to run for president, even though racial segregation had been outlawed decades earlier, the election of a black man seemed like the furthest thing from reality. This fact did not escape Barack Obama, and in a campaign speech he addressed the issue of not being able to change or erase black-white racial tensions with his candidacy. But he said he did want to continue the journey that began 4 decades earlier.
This was one of the tasks we set forth at the beginning of this presidential campaign, to continue the long march of those who came before us. A march for a more just, more equal, more free, more caring, and more prosperous America. I chose to run for president at this moment in history because I believe deeply that we cannot solve the challenges of our time unless we solve them together.
On this show, we ask, now that the U.S. will have its first black president, how easily will Americans be able to shed their past of racial inequalities? Remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments. Log on to livestation.com/AJE, enter the chat room and take part. We also welcome your phone calls on the show. Joining me today here in Washington to discuss these issues and many more is Janet Langhart-Cohen, an acclaimed journalist and writer who debuted a groundbreaking one-act play, Anne and Emmett, which depicts an imaginary conversation between Anne Frank and Emmett Till, both young victims of racism. And her husband, who, after many years as a Republican senator, demonstrated cross-party cooperation in 1997 when he became the U.S. Secretary of Defense under Democratic President Bill Clinton. Well, Janet, by the way, is also a Democrat. Together, William and Janet Cohen are the authors of Love in Black and White, a memoir of race, religion, and romance. Welcome, both of you, back to the show.
Thank you, Riz.
Thank you, with you, Riz.
Pleasure. Mr. Secretary, I have to start with you and ask, we'll talk about really what many viewers wouldn't know, which is your past as an activist and the fact that you were involved in the civil rights movement as well, out on the marches, and actually you even defended affirmative action in the Senate once you became a senator. Did you expect, I mean, it's a question you've no doubt been asked, but did you expect an African-American president to take office, you know, while you were, well, witnessing it?
While they're still alive.
Yeah, while you're still alive.
I actually did. I felt that Colin Powell, had he chosen to run back in 2000, that I thought that he could have become president because he had the 4 stars on his shoulders. He was highly respected by most Americans. And I think that had he chosen to run, he could have won. I think there's some division in our household in terms of that viability, but that was my impression. I think he could have, and I think I was convinced that Barack Obama could win as well.
Now, you yourself actually have faced discrimination. Again, people always think in terms of black and white, but you faced discrimination in the same way perhaps that Janet faced it for color. You faced it because of your Jewish heritage on your father's side. I remember you saying that you were told with a name like Cohen you'd never be elected to Congress, and even had to face, you know, the taunts like Jew boy and so on. Now, you know, what lessons did you learn from your own facing your own challenges there?
It was character building because on the one hand, my mother is Irish and my father being Jewish, and I was half of each, whole of neither, and accepted by neither community. As far as the Jewish community is concerned, I was Irish, a Goyim, and as far as the Goyim community, I was Jewish. And so it was living in a world in which I had no sense of identity with either community. On the one hand, it was difficult. On the other, it I think gave me an appreciation for what it means to be an underdog. To have to struggle to identify oneself and to be strong enough to bear the insults and all the rejection.
Could have been worse. The family could have chosen the name Oko, and then you.
Or it could have been Kohan.
Janet,
Well,
again,
I think it gave him a greater empathy for me, for our marriage to be so successful. He could understand what it's like to be an outsider, to be part of something and yet not part of it. So that was a great benefit to me.
now you were sort of marking Martin Luther King Day as well, and you yourself were friends with Dr. Martin Luther King.
I did know Dr. King. I knew Dr. King the last 2 years of his life, Riz, and as a matter of fact, I celebrated his last birthday with him, and I remember giving him a wallet, and later, some 35 years later, discovering in the museum, his museum, that he did have it on his person. And that gave me.
And you described growing up in two Americas where racial segregation was obviously a reality. You even saw a cousin lynched. You had relatives who were killed.
I had heard. I have a cousin. I had a cousin who was lynched, and I had a peer who was lynched. A young boy the same age as I. His name was Emmett Till. He was from Chicago, like Barack Obama, and he went to Money, Mississippi, to visit his family for the summer. And he made the mistake of not adhering to racial etiquette, and he whistled at a white woman. And because of it, he was lynched. And his mother allowed his casket to remain open so the world could see how the racists had mutilated him. And that really was the beginning of the new civil rights movement, with Rosa Parks sitting on the bus, and of course then Dr. King. And we know the rest of that story.
Having seen that, having been through a life yourself where there were doors marked for people of color and doors marked for white people, what does the inauguration of Barack Obama represent to you then?
I'm in a state of euphoria and disbelief, happiness. I'm reflecting because the irony of Dr. King's birthday dovetailing into Obama's inauguration. We have all of this together. It's though it was written to remember the dark days of this country where we had to sit on the back of the bus. We didn't have the opportunities we have now. And to see a black man in the White House taking those steps up there, it symbolizes something great for this country, but I want to see the substance. As we move past inaugural day, I want to see where we are on the issues of race in this country. And I'm delighted to hear Barack Obama speak about race now, because during his campaign, he was very reluctant until forced to speak about it in Philadelphia.
We've got a caller on the line from Washington, D.C. Najee, what would you like to ask?
I would like to ask the Senate.
Go ahead.
I just want to give some comments about how I saw it in the United States. When I came, especially in the South, I still see it quite segregated. I still quite see the black with black and white with white. And I don't think that the society has really learned a lot about, the racism and stuff. And I do have another comment, because I believe that the Americans stopped, or at least, forgot about, moved from a discrimination for race to a discrimination of religion, that Muslims are quite targeted nowadays.
Yeah.
And you know better than me how Muslims are, portrayed in the American society and the American media.
That's an interesting point, actually, and perhaps I could put that to Secretary Cohen, that it's sad, actually, in a way. Some people feel that America needs a bad guy sometimes, and perhaps race is moving on, but suddenly, there's a whole religion now. It's not just even a group like the Arab world or anything, but it's Muslims now are a threat.
Well, we're going to have a young man by the name of Barack Hussein Obama. And I think it's significant that he's going to take the oath of office with his middle name. And I think that is also a signal saying, this is who I am. And he is now trying to reach out to the rest of the world. He said, I am a citizen of the world, which obviously, usually is very controversial, saying, no, you're American. But no, he's saying, I'm reaching out to the rest of the world and say, we have to heal the wounds that have festered for so long. And we ought not to start new wounds and open new wounds by either stigmatizing people by virtue of their religion or by their ethnic identity or their racial identity.
And I agree with the caller. I think the caller is absolutely right. We Americans have morphed, if you will. We haven't changed. We've just morphed into seemingly accepting each other based on color. But it does seem to be okay in certain circles, especially during our campaign, to speak of the people who who are Muslim or Arab in a pejorative. And I think it was Colin Powell. And at one point, it was John McCain who spoke out and said, it isn't okay to say that.
There's an email I'd like to put to you, actually, please, Janet. We got in from Carol Lloyd in Florida in the USA, who says, you would think we could put our past of racial inequalities behind us, but even after a long primary and election season, there's still a lot of intolerance out there.
Yes, it is. We've taken some giant steps on discrimination, racial discrimination, religious discrimination, as well as gender discrimination in this country, but we have a long way to go. When you have people who have a living memory of sitting on the back of the bus, of being denied anything, education opportunity because of their color, we have a long way to go.
And it was only, sorry.
I was just going to jump in to point out that right after Barack Obama was elected, gun sales went up in this country. Right after he was elected, there were a series of attacks upon black people in this country. Right after he was elected, in my own home state of Maine, there was a lottery set up to predict the day of his martyrdom, not the end of the economic crisis. So there is still, as Janet was saying, we've made a lot of progress, but there's still a very long way to go.
What's also curious is that Barack Obama could not strategically talk about race, the one cancer, the human stain, as Condoleezza Rice calls slavery and racism on America. He could not talk about that issue. He could talk about economics, he could talk about war, but the one dividing line, cancer, which is racism, has been in our country. He couldn't talk about it, and as I said before, it is so wonderful to see him address it now.
And I'll touch on how, you know, affirmative action and political correctness might be a good or a bad thing when we get back from this break. Now, as we take this break, let me remind you can join in the conversation with your questions and comments by logging on to livestation.com and entering the chat room. You can see the debates taking place there right now. As we take the short break, we want to let you know we went out onto the streets of Washington, D.C. to get your opinion on a Barack Obama presidency.
So with Obama in office is very significant, very important, because he is the example now for all of African Americans and everybody, that anybody can become president, anybody can do what they want to do. There's no more excuses.
And everyone's really excited about it. It's nice to see the country come together and be really excited about something for a change.
Dr. Martin Luther King had a dream, and that dream is coming true, slowly but surely.